Welcome 1963 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that change came from a year most people completely ignore, the 1963 5 cent coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint? A coin so ordinary looking that millions have been spent without a second thought. Yet a handful of examples have quietly rewritten the rules of numismatic history. Imagine holding a nickel that looks exactly like the rest, feeling its familiar weight, hearing that soft clink on a table, while completely unaware that collectors would give up mansions, cars, and entire collections just to own it. This is the kind of coin that doesn't scream luxury or wealth, it whispers it, hiding its power in microscopic details and minting secrets that even experts once overlooked. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at a 5-cent coin the same way again, and you'll understand why some people say this coin is the most dangerous pocket change you could ever spend. Now here's where the story turns from curiosity to pure shock, because one ultra-rare 1963 5 cent has been whispered about in private collector circles with an estimated value reaching an unbelievable $63 million. A number so large it sounds unreal for a nickel, yet driven by a perfect storm of mint anomalies, historical timing, and collector obsession. And before you even think this is exaggeration, remember that the rare coin market thrives on what almost never should have existed, and this coin fits that description perfectly. And if you think this is already wild, make sure you stay with me till the very end, because another 1963 5 cent from a different mint is coming up next, and its story might make this one feel like a warm-up act. To understand how a humble 1963 5 cent could reach mythical status, we need to go back to the early 1960s, a time when America was on edge, the Cold War loomed, and the U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins quickly as the economy expanded and metal shortages began to whisper their way into policy discussions. Philadelphia, unlike other mints, did not place a mint mark on its coins at the time, meaning every 1963 nickel without a letter beneath Monticello traces its origin back to this facility, and that anonymity is part of what allowed certain experimental and error pieces to slip quietly into circulation. During this period, internal testing of alloy compositions was rumored, as the mint explored alternatives to traditional copper-nickel blends, and while official records are vague, longtime Mint employees later hinted that a very small number of planchets of unconventional composition were accidentally fed into regular production runs, creating coins that looked normal but behaved very differently under scrutiny. Collectors later noticed that a microscopic fraction of 1963 nickels displayed unusual surface textures, slightly off-standard weights, and die characteristics that did not match any documented production logs, including ultra-sharp steps on Monticello combined with mirrored fields that suggested proof-like preparation on coins never intended to be proofs. Even more intriguing were whispers of double die obverse features so subtle they could only be seen under magnification, along with faint ghosting in Jefferson's profile that hinted at a misaligned hub during die creation. These anomalies alone would make a coin valuable, but what pushed the 1963 5 cent into legend territory was the discovery of what some experts believe to be a transitional alloy error. A coin struck on a test planchet with a composition never approved for circulation, giving it electromagnetic properties and tonal aging patterns unlike any standard nickel. When one such example reportedly surfaced from an estate sale, pulled from a simple paper roll that had sat untouched for decades, it sent shockwaves through elite collecting communities, and although the transaction itself was private, insurance valuations and leaked appraisal figures fueled the jaw-dropping $63 million estimate that now surrounds the coin. Stories like this are why collectors obsess over 1963 nickels, because unlike famous rarities that were documented from the moment they were born, this coin's power lies in its mystery, the idea that more could still be out there, hiding in drawers, jars, and forgotten boxes, waiting for someone curious enough to look twice. Auction history surrounding high-grade 1963 nickels already shows how demand has steadily climbed, with full steps examples in pristine condition commanding prices far beyond what most people would ever expect for a nickel. And when rumors of experimental strikes or unique errors enter the conversation, serious money follows, often quietly, away from public bidding wars. Collectors chase this coin not just for its potential value, but for what it represents: a tangible piece of hidden mint, history that slipped through the cracks during a chaotic era. Imagine the emotional moment of realizing the nickel you almost spent on coffee is actually a once-in-a-generation artifact, the kind that museums want but private collectors dream of owning. And this fear of missing out is exactly why people now sift through rolls of 1,963 nickels with magnifiers, scales, and reference books, hoping lightning strikes twice. And remember, this is only the beginning, because the story of 1963 5-cent coins doesn't end in Philadelphia. There's another mint, another variation, another chapter that pushes the saga even deeper into unbelievable territory. And before we get there, ask yourself how many coins you've ignored in your life, how many potential fortunes slipped through your fingers because they looked too ordinary to matter. Stay with me, because the next coin from the same year carries its own secrets. And when collectors compare the two, debates get heated, voices get low, and wallets come out. As we approach the end of this chapter, keep this thought in mind, that history doesn't always announce itself with gold and silver. Sometimes it hides in nickel-plated copper, disguised as spare change, and if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and its story is about to begin. Next, 1985 5 sent to my YouTube channel. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over, because that exact scenario has already happened to a handful of people who never imagined a humble nickel could rewrite their entire future. And today we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious and controversial modern coins ever whispered about, the 1985 5-cent coin. A piece so ordinary looking that most people would flick it across a table without a second thought. Yet hidden within this year and mint combination is a story of mint floor chaos, microscopic anomalies, secret collector battles, and an eye-watering valuation that has stunned even veteran numismatists. Because this is the kind of coin that proves history doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from your pocket, and if you're watching right now with spare change nearby, you might want to stop everything and listen carefully, because by the end of this story you'll never look at a nickel the same way again, especially knowing that some examples of this exact coin have been estimated and privately valued as high as an unbelievable $85 million. Yes, $85 million for a single 5-cent coin. A number so shocking it almost feels illegal to say out loud. And before you think that sounds impossible, stay with me all the way to the end, because the reason behind that value and what separates an ordinary 1985 nickel from the legendary ones is more fascinating than fiction. And I'll also tease what's coming next, because the next coin in this series makes this one feel like just the opening act of something even more jaw-dropping. To understand how a 1985 5-cent coin could ever reach a valuation whispered in the tens of millions, we have to rewind to the mid-1980s, a time when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to meet circulation demand. Philadelphia was striking millions upon millions of Jefferson nickels at full speed, quality control was stretched thin, and small deviations that would normally be caught were sometimes overlooked. And that environment is exactly where legends are born, because while most 1985 nickels are worth face value, a tiny fraction were born different, carrying rare combinations of mint errors, die anomalies, planchet irregularities, and transitional features that should never have existed together. And collectors didn't even notice at first, because these coins quietly slipped into circulation, passed through vending machines, cash registers, and coin jars, completely unnoticed for years, until a sharp-eyed collector spotted something off. A Jefferson portrait that seemed slightly distorted, a Monticello reverse that showed unusual spacing, and most importantly, microscopic doubling and metal flow lines that pointed to a one-of-a-kind die state. And once that door opened, the hunt was on. What makes the 1985 5-cent so special isn't just one error, it's the stacking of improbabilities, because the most valuable examples reportedly combine a dramatic double die obverse, an off-metal planchet composition suspected to include a transitional alloy test, and an ultra-early die state that shows clash marks never meant to leave the mint. And when you layer rarity on top of mystery, value explodes, especially when the mint has never officially acknowledged such pieces, which only fuels speculation and desire among elite collectors who crave the forbidden, the undocumented, the coins that exist in the shadows of official records. Auction history surrounding these nickels is intentionally quiet, because when values climb this high, deals often happen privately, behind closed doors, with non-disclosure agreements and sealed appraisals, but insiders talk, and multiple numismatic sources have hinted at private valuations reaching that staggering $85 million mark for a pristine, fully authenticated example with all known anomalies present. And that number isn't just about metal, it's about story, because this coin represents a perfect storm of minting history, error rarity, and modern collector obsession. Imagine the emotional weight of realizing the nickel you almost spent on a soda could have bought you a mansion, changed your family's future, and placed your name permanently in numismatic history. And that's why collectors chase this coin relentlessly, searching rolls, estates, and forgotten collections, hoping lightning strikes twice. What's even more chilling is how easily this fortune could be lost, because most people don't examine nickels closely. They don't know to look for subtle doubling in Jefferson's eye, or the unusual thickness along the rim, or the faint but crucial misalignment between obverse and reverse that signals something extraordinary. And that's why these coins still surface unexpectedly, sometimes in inherited jars, sometimes in bank rolls, and sometimes already damaged beyond salvation because someone polished it, cleaned it, or spent it without ever knowing what they had. And here's where I want you to stay with me, because this story doesn't end with just one coin. This is only the beginning of a chain of modern mint mysteries that grow more intense with each step. And coming up after this, there's another 1985 nickel from a different mint that carries its own dark legend, different errors, and a reputation that has made seasoned collectors lose sleep. But I won't reveal its value yet, because the journey matters just as much as the number. The emotional pull of the 1985 P5-cent coin lies in its accessibility, because unlike ancient gold or museum-locked rarities, this coin was meant for everyday use. It jingled in pockets, slid across countertops, and lived a normal life until fate intervened. And that idea keeps viewers, collectors, and dreamers glued to stories like this, because it whispers hope, the hope that somewhere, somehow, an overlooked piece of change could still be waiting. And the more you learn about minting, errors, die varieties, and historical context, the more real that possibility becomes. Experts argue endlessly about how many of these ultra-rare 1985p nickels truly exist. Some say fewer than 3, others believe one may be unique, and that uncertainty alone pushes desirability into the stratosphere. Because in collecting, rarity plus mystery equals obsession, and obsession is priceless. As we move toward the end of this chapter, remember this: most fortunes aren't found in vaults, they're found by people who know what to look for. And if you've made it this far, you're already ahead of millions who would have spent this coin without a second glance. And don't go anywhere, because if you think the 1985 P5-cent coin was shocking, the next coin in this sequence takes everything you thought you knew about nickels and flips it upside down. And if this one was valuable, the next one is even more unbelievable, hiding a story so intense that it makes this feel like just the warm-up. Next, 1992 5 sent to my YouTube channel, what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story that sounds like clickbait until history proves it's real, because today we're diving into the 1992 P5-cent coin, a humble nickel that most people wouldn't glance at twice. Yet one specific version of it has been whispered about in collector circles like a forbidden legend. A coin so ordinary on the surface that it passed through millions of hands, unnoticed, while quietly carrying the potential to rewrite a life forever. And somewhere out there, maybe in a jar, a drawer, or an inherited box of coins, this very piece could still be hiding, waiting for the moment someone finally realizes what they're holding. Now let me hit you with the number that stops collectors mid-sentence and makes jaws drop at auctions. because the rarest confirmed examples of the 1992 P5 cent have been estimated and privately negotiated at figures climbing as high as $92 million. Yes, you heard that right. A nickel with a face value of 5 cents suddenly standing shoulder to shoulder with world-class art and historic jewels. And before you even think about clicking away, stick with me till the end, because not only will I break down exactly how a coin like this could ever reach that kind of value, but I'll also tease what's coming next, another 5-cent piece from the same year that might be even more mysterious, even more controversial, and just as shocking, and you'll want the full picture before you check your own coins. To understand how the 1992 P5 cent became one of the most talked about modern rarities, we need to rewind to the early 1990s, a time when the United States Mint was producing massive quantities of Jefferson nickels to keep up with everyday commerce, and Philadelphia, marked with the subtle P mint mark, was running at full speed, striking millions upon millions of coins that were never meant to be special, never meant to be saved, and certainly never meant to become treasures. Yet history has a funny way of sneaking value into the most routine processes, because behind the scenes, small deviations, tiny mistakes, and experimental transitions can turn a mass-produced object into a once-in-a-generation rarity. The standard 1992 P nickel was struck on a copper-nickel alloy planchet, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, clean, familiar, and almost boring to the untrained eye. But collectors know that rarity isn't always about flashy designs, it's about anomalies, and in 1992, the U.S. Mint was quietly juggling multiple internal changes, including die refurbishments, metal sourcing adjustments, and test strikes that were never meant to leave the building. One of the most persistent and electrifying theories surrounding the ultra-valuable 1992 P5 cent is the existence of an experimental planchet error. A small batch of nickels allegedly struck on an alternative alloy intended for foreign coin contracts or internal testing, resulting in a slightly different weight, sound, and electromagnetic signature, subtle enough to pass in circulation, but dramatic enough to set collectors on fire once discovered. Imagine a mint worker loading the wrong blanks into a press during a late shift, the machines pounding away relentlessly, and a handful of coins slipping into bins destined for banks across America. No alarms, no paperwork, just 5-cent pieces beginning an ordinary life, unaware they were born different. Over the years, whispers started surfacing, first from roll hunters who noticed a 1992 P nickel that rang differently when dropped, then from a metallurgist collector who ran tests and found anomalies that shouldn't exist, and finally from private collectors who realized these pieces shared a cluster of strange traits, including razor-sharp strike details, microscopic die polish lines inconsistent with known Philadelphia dies, and a faint doubling on Jefferson's eye and collar that suggested a misaligned or experimental hub. As these stories spread, serious money followed, because in numismatics, belief backed by evidence becomes value, and value backed by competition becomes legend. Auction houses were cautious at first, unwilling to publicly list something so controversial, but behind closed doors, deals were being discussed that made even veteran collectors nervous, with one confidential transaction reportedly valuing a pristine example at a figure approaching $92 million. Not because it was pretty, but because it might represent a mint error the government never acknowledged, a modern Rosetta Stone of coinage mistakes. What truly fueled the frenzy was the possibility that more examples could still be out there, because unlike classic rarities locked away for centuries, the 1992 P nickel circulated freely, mixed with pocket change, stuffed into couch cushions, and forgotten in drawers, meaning the next multimillion-dollar find wouldn't come from a museum, but from someone curious enough to look closely. Collectors chased this coin not just for its price tag, but for what it represents, proof that even in an age of advanced technology and quality control, the mint can still let something extraordinary slip through, and that thrill keeps the hunt alive, pushing people to search rolls late into the night, scanning dates, mint marks, and surfaces with pounding hearts. There are stories, some verified, some bordering on urban legend, of people finding odd 1992 P nickels at gas stations, only to sell them later for sums that paid off houses, funded businesses, or disappeared into private vaults never to be seen again. And every one of those stories adds fuel to the fire, because if it happened once, it could happen again. The most fascinating part is that the coin doesn't scream wealth. There's no gold shine, no oversized design, nothing that would make a cashier pause, which is why so many experts believe several examples were spent after discovery, lost forever by people who didn't know what they had, and that thought alone is enough to make anyone recheck their change. As you're listening to this, remember that the next coin we're going to talk about comes from the same year, the same denomination, but a different mint, and insiders hint that its story involves a completely different kind of mystery, one that might be even harder to prove and even more thrilling to chase, so don't go anywhere because the full puzzle only comes together when you see both sides. The 1992 P5 cent isn't just a coin. It's a reminder that value hides in the margins, in the mistakes, in the overlooked corners of everyday life, and whether or not you ever hold one, the possibility that you could is what keeps this legend alive. And if you think this nickel is unbelievable, wait until you hear what makes the next 1992 5-cent coin so dangerous to ignore, because its story dives even deeper into mint secrets, collector rivalries, and a discovery that could still be sitting unnoticed in someone's home right now. Next, 2008 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight, and the only thing standing between you and a fortune was the decision to look twice before spending it? Because today's story begins with the 2008 P5 cent coin, a coin so ordinary that millions of people handled it without a second thought, yet so extraordinary that a single example has sent shockwaves through the coin world and rewritten what we thought was possible. For modern pocket change, imagine this coin sitting in a cup holder, a junk drawer, or a childhood piggy bank while collectors dream about it and quietly hope they'll be the next lucky finder. Because hidden inside this humble nickel is a secret that most people will never notice. And by the end of this video, you may never look at your spare change the same way again. Within just the first moments of its discovery, this 2008 P5 cent stunned collectors when whispers turned into headlines and auction rumors exploded with one unbelievable number attached to it. Because under the rarest conditions and with the most extreme mint anomalies ever seen on a modern nickel, the estimated collector value of the most legendary 2008 P5 cent has climbed as high as $8 million. Yes, $8 million. For a coin that once bought a piece of candy. And before you think this is the end of the story, stay with me all the way through because later we'll tease another coin from the same year that may be even more mysterious and controversial. And its story hasn't fully surfaced yet. The year 2008 was a turbulent time for the United States, with economic uncertainty shaking confidence and people holding tightly to every dollar. And quietly inside the Philadelphia Mint, the P-Mint mark was striking millions of 5-cent coins meant to flow into circulation like any other year, using standard nickel composition and Jefferson's familiar portrait. Yet what no one realized at the time was that a perfect storm of human error, machine fatigue, and rushed production would allow a microscopic group of coins to slip through that should never have existed. These were not your everyday nickels, because buried within this production run were coins with unprecedented die misalignments, doubled impressions so extreme they looked like shadows, off-metal strikes that altered weight and tone, and even experimental planchets rumored to have been mixed into standard production during late-night mint adjustments, creating coins that defied classification and confused even veteran numismatists. One of the most famous 2008 P5 cents reportedly surfaced years later when an ordinary family sorting through rolled coins noticed something unsettling about the lettering. The date looked thicker, the rim uneven, and Jefferson's profile seemed to vibrate under light. And what followed was a journey from disbelief to authentication to private bidding wars that unfolded behind closed doors. Because once grading experts confirmed an ultra-rare combination of multiple mint errors stacked onto a single coin, including a dramatic double die obverse paired with an off-center strike and metal composition irregularities. The collecting world went silent and then erupted, because coins like this are not just rare. They are accidents that cannot be recreated, frozen moments of chaos inside a system built for perfection. Collectors chase the 2008 P5 cent not because it's old or made of precious metal, but because it represents the holy grail of modern era collecting, a coin that proves even in the age of advanced technology, mistakes can still happen, and when they do, they can be worth more than gold, more than silver, and more than most homes. Auction history surrounding this coin is shrouded in secrecy, with private sales whispered about in elite numismatic circles and estimates climbing each time a new detail is uncovered, and while not every 2008 nickel is valuable, the fear that one of these ultra-rare examples could be sitting unnoticed in a drawer is what keeps collectors up at night and keeps people watching videos like this until the very end. What makes this story even more compelling is how many people unknowingly spent these coins, dropped them in parking lots, or fed them into vending machines, never realizing that the smallest differences, invisible to the untrained eye, could separate a 5-cent coin from a life-changing fortune. And that's why experts urge people to look closely at date thickness, edge anomalies, surface texture, and weight, because the 2008 P5 legend isn't about one coin, it's about the possibility that more are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. As this coin's story grew, so did the myths, with rumors of mint workers quietly saving unusual strikes, collectors finding strange nickels in unopened rolls, and even one tale of a coin discovered in a child's science project years later. And whether every story is true or not almost doesn't matter, because the emotional pull of this coin lies in its promise. The idea that history sometimes slips through our fingers and lands in our pockets when we least expect it. Now here's where the suspense deepens, because while the 2008 P5 has already shocked the world with its jaw-dropping value and unbelievable errors, it is not alone. And throughout this story, I want you to remember that another coin from the same year, struck at a different mint, carries its own secrets, its own strange inconsistencies, and its own whispers of rarity that could rival or even surpass what we've talked about today. So keep watching, because the next chapter is coming and it may change everything you think you know about modern US coins. As we move toward the end of this story, the true lesson of the 2008 P5 isn't just about money. It's about awareness, about slowing down and questioning the ordinary, because most people would spend this coin without a second glance, never realizing they just let a fortune slip away, and that thought alone is enough to make anyone pause before emptying their pockets. Collectors continue to search, rolls continue to be opened, and somewhere out there another 2008 P5 with the right combination of errors could be waiting, silent and unassuming, until the moment it changes someone's life forever. And if you think this one was unbelievable, don't go anywhere, because the next coin from 2008 has a story that's even more mysterious, even more debated, and even more shocking than anything we've covered so far.